And we're back. So what do we have to consider when it's time to select a crop? I mentioned earlier, very brief concept of where you are. The country matters because you need to have a market. If you're exporting, you need to have the infrastructure to export. You need the way to get your product from point A to point B. You need the people, the trucks, the sales folks, the refrigeration. You need all of the stuff that it requires to harvest, cool, process, pack, ship your product. And so that is partly based on your country, partly based on the region, and partly based on the the local factors. But there's also adaptation. Is it going to grow there? No matter how much I love limes, Salinas is not a good place to start a lime production business. It's not a good environment. It's not hot enough. You just don't grow limes here. You can grow a lime tree if you really want one, preferably a lemon tree. They'll handle it a little better, but it's just not the environment for that. If I want to grow watermelons, good luck. Maybe I can grow a few watermelons down in King City, but still, I'm much better off going to the Central Valley. And even in a small area, like I mentioned before, even in a small area like right here in Salinas, there are so many microclimates in different parts of Salinas. Are you talking about Northwest Salinas, heading out towards the CSU Monterey Bay, going up the northwest side of the Blanco area? Or am I talking southern Salinas over off of Old Stage Road, heading down to Chular? Where are you talking? There's canyons and hillsides and lots of different climates. Right here in Prunedale, there's some really good niches that are great for strawberry, but not for certain other crops. The local economy, you need to have labor for certain crops more than others. You need to have the raw materials, such as the wine industry here really had some interesting growing pains back in the 90s and late 80s because Monterey just didn't have the materials locally for not only the labor crews, but the stuff that you need, the grafting knives, the trellising stuff, the PCAs or pest control advisors that have expertise in wine vineyards, wine grape vineyards. And uh, without that, you've got to do a little more scrambling. You got to do things on your own. You've got to order things from Napa and have them trucked down here or something like that. Now, there's enough of a wine grape production in this area that's not a problem. The labor's still a problem. What about input requirements and costs? Maybe I really like the idea of starting a vineyard and growing some grapes. Really expensive. It's hard to get into because you not only have to spend a lot of money per acre to get started, way more per acre than if I'm just growing broccoli, but I'm not going to get my first crop for 3 or 4 years. So I've got to not only cover the installation and hold that for 3 or 4 years, but I got to keep it going and irrigate, fertilize, prune, and do all of the other things, trellis uh, training and everything else. So grapes is really heavy on input requirements. Strawberries, much more similar to lettuce or broccoli in terms of it being treated as an annual crop, but it's still way more expensive. It's a lot more expensive to grow an acre of strawberries than it is to grow an acre of broccoli. Way more expensive. But you also have the potential of making a lot more money even after you subtract out those more costs. And that's where you get profit potential. How much does it cost? How much am I potentially, realistically going to make? I subtract the costs from my gross profit. What I'm left with is my net profit, what's left over. And of course, you want that to be as big a number as you can. If you're running a business, you want to have as much profit as is realistic. And you have to be able to float the business with the out of pocket costs. So like I was saying with broccoli, I can go in relatively cheap per acre and make a living, but I'm not going to be getting rich off broccoli per acre. It just doesn't have huge profit potential, but it's a consistent market. Celery, another consistent producer, probably, I don't know what growers would say today, but I know back in my day, not too long ago, it was better than broccoli, more consistent than broccoli, to be sure, for making profit. Um, but you have to also rotate your crops, which I have at the bottom of this list. You can't just grow strawberry, 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 strawberry because you can make more money off of it. You have to rotate or you're going to get strawberry root diseases and all kinds of problems. So you mix it in with broccoli and lettuce and other things. Um, and so the crop rotation dovetails or ties in with the idea of crop rotation, pest disease. The crop rotation dovetails with the diseases, with insects. You have to mix it up or you're going to have insects, you're going to have fungal diseases, bacterial diseases take over your area if you aren't mixing it up. So some other considerations. What are other growers doing? If you look at the history of this area, what was the ag product in this area many generations ago? Dairy cows and fisheries. So either people ran a dairy or they were off Cannery Row running the boats and fisheries. We weren't doing lettuce, but as prices went up and up on the land, as Salinas built up, the Salinas Valley built up, the land cost pressure made it harder to make money in dairy, and people moved to something that was per acre more profitable than dairy, and that was lettuce. And we were the lettuce capital for quite a long time. And the pressure on prices, land costs in particular, kept pushing up. And so we're still growing lettuce, but it pushed to grow other things as well. And that had to be combined with genetic and breeding improvements. When I first came to this area in the mid 90s, um, there was no strawberries here. There was one strawberry field that I can remember off of Blanca Road, and they had a little roadside stand where they would sell their strawberries right on the side of the field and take them to the farmers market. But there was very little. I'm sure there was more than that, but it was very little, and it was mostly going out towards the coast, nothing further inland. Now it's everywhere inland. Why? Originally, it was one variety from the UC system called Diamante. And Diamante was a strawberry variety that was it was sweet, but kind of a sugary sweet. It wasn't the rich strawberry flavor. It was kind of a little bit bland in flavor, but it was good. It was not a bad strawberry, just not as, oh, that's a wonderful strawberry like some varieties have had. It's big, nice conical shape, um, grew well, and could handle Salinas, central Salinas. Didn't have to be right on the coast. And so Diamante was just kind of a placeholder, and its sister came in called Albion, and Albion just changed everything for the UC varieties, University of California varieties that were being grown here. And at the same time, Driscoll's came out with their own varieties, which I would argue are better flavor, but um, I think a lot of people would agree with that. If you put them in a blind taste test or something, the the varieties that not only were coming along but that could handle Salinas just changed everything. And the land costs at the same time as developing varieties to move in here that would grow here, and we're getting a lot more strawberries. And you go back a number of years, and the same thing was happening in Ventura, California. They were a big lettuce area that went to a big strawberry area, and they moved strawberries into the point where lettuce got kicked out. And then what's the next crop in Ventura? Condominiums and strip malls. And as land prices go up, it becomes real estate and no longer ag. And we're seeing the same pattern here. And there's a lot of people concerned about that and wanting to make sure that we do things to preserve that land. But I get off track. But what are other growers doing? They're growing lettuce, broccoli. You go close to the coast, there's artichokes and um, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, all kinds of stuff. Well, why are they doing that? Because it works here, and because we have the labor that understands how to harvest it. We have the customers, the infrastructure, the cooling systems. We have all of that. So doing what somebody else is doing isn't a bad idea, but sometimes it can be really good to break the mold. Try something new. Try radicchio, frisee, kale. There's a large operation that does the prickly pears, tunas, higochumbo, whatever you want to call it, the cactus pears, and the nopales. Huevos revueltos con nopalitos. Yum. Well, they grow those not too far from here, down towards Soledad. And is that a big crop here? No, but for that grower, it's an excellent niche market. And there are lots of niche markets. You just have to pick them well. If you don't do good in a niche market, somebody's going to come in and take it away from you, or it's going to completely flop and the market will dry up. So don't be afraid to think outside the box, try something new. There's something called corn salad, which some people grow. You might know it by other names, but to think of new ideas, to try something. Thinking's free. Trying it costs money. And if you find a partner where you have a customer who's willing to take a little risk and you as a grower is willing to take a little risk, you can share some of that risk where, hey, if it works, great, you make some money. If it doesn't work, it was fun to try. So here's that corn salad that I was talking about. It's just another leafy green, similar in terms of use or in terms of dietary consumption. It's not that dissimilar to a baby leaf spinach or something, but it's just another darker green leafy material. And it's called corn salad because in Europe, what they would do, corn takes a while to grow up. So they would plant the corn and the corn salad at the same time. And as the corn is coming up and still really young, the corn salad's coming up and it covers the beds on either side. And they'll come in and they'll harvest the corn salad on the sides of the beds, and they'll get a crop of corn salad. And then the corn fills in and takes over the rest of the field. They get the corn. So they get two crops out of the same acre. And other people might call it mache. Here's mache, M-A-C-H-E. That's another common name in certain parts of the world for it, or lamb's lettuce, winter lettuce. It's not lettuce, but it is used as a leafy green that can be used in salads and more nutritious than just plain crisp head or iceberg lettuce. So let's go into some of those things. Regional adaptations, the most important thing here is weather. And so weather, we're not talking about weather and climate in exactly the same ways. The weather is what's going on right now, but more importantly, we need to think about the overall climate patterns. But weather can change. The overall climate, the overall patterns of weather, climate, can really influence what will and what won't grow. And what are the extremes on those patterns? Some places there's a general pattern, but it can vary a lot. And that makes it really difficult to pick a crop crop that will grow because each year is too unpredictable. So it narrows your choices. But there are certain regions that have generally warmer, cooler climates, cold versus warm crops, things like lettuce and broccoli and asparagus and strawberries grow wonderfully here. But in the Central Valley of California, go out in the Sacramento down to Fresno, and they're growing melons and corn and tomatoes and things that like the heat. What about rainfall patterns? There are things called dryland crops. We don't do much of that here, although some of our grazing land for cattle beef production is dry land. Uh, you count on Mother Nature. There's no sprinklers, there's no irrigation system. You cross your fingers that you get enough rain to get enough of a crop to grow to sustain your grazing. Um, but also the ability to cultivate and harvest. There are some areas, the rainy season could come right at harvest time. And if rain and harvest are coinciding at the same time, that's really a challenge. And for some crops, that's a disaster. The rain at harvest is going to destroy the crop or make it impossible to get the necessary people and equipment out in the field to do the harvest. So again, you have to think, what could work here? Do I need to re-engineer things and try something out of the box? Or do I stick to what I see going on in the area already because generations of people before me have already worked out the kinks? Day length. Here we have long days in the summer and fall, early fall, and short days in the winter. And the long days can cause a problem with day length sensitive crops. Things like spinach with certain varieties of spinach, not all of them, but some varieties of spinach, if the day length gets too long, it will start to bolt or go into flower where it elongates and goes to flower. And that's not good. You don't want it flowering, you want it making leaves because people buy spinach leaves. And I've had, baby leaf spinach bolt up to these little things that are no more than 4 or 5 inches tall with just a few flowers on it. Totally useless for harvest, but it was because of a day length problem that can even be caused by artificial light. In the case I'm talking about with that one, it was actually a street light that caused an overly sensitive spinach variety to start bolting when it was only, about 2.5 inches of diameter plant, just barely getting started. And it's like, oh, day length is really long, street light at night, and so it starts going to flower. But there are lots of other things: soil type, soil pH, the salinity or the amount of salt in the soil. Some crops are really good about salt, others not so much. Strawberries and lettuce, two things we grow here, hate the salt. The cactus pears or tunas, they don't care as much at all about salt. Yeah, you can have too much for any crop, but they're certainly not as sensitive as something like lettuce. Soil profile, that refers to the depth and layers or horizons of the soil. Take a soil science class if you haven't already. Where's the water table? Is it a deep water table or a shallow water table that might keep the roots wet all the time? Is there a hard pan so the roots are like hitting the bottom of a swimming pool when they go down just a foot or so? What about slope? Am I growing on flat ground or on a hillside? Again, all of those things will add another layer of consideration. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. What am I going to grow? Let's take another quick break